And good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, Tony Defio, and I thank you for joining me on this very, very rainy and gloomy Friday night in Pittsburgh. But wherever you are in Steeler Nation, I hope it's nice and mild and cloud-free and rain-free. But if not, hey, it's springtime, and it's better than winter, right? It's better than all the snow we got last winter. So, at any rate, I am so glad for you guys to join me. And before I continue, as always, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe to our Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube channel, where we bring you live shows each and every night, including this show, the Steelers preview, the Steelers post-game stuff. We Run the North, Bad Language. The curtain call in the off season, that's with Jeffrey Benedict and Shannon White, two very excellent Steelers analysts. I mean, they do a great job. So please check that out. What else we have? Of course, we have the Hangover on Monday with yours truly, Brian and Shannon. We have the Scobro Show with Dave Schofield and his brother Rich, his big brother Rich. I think that covered all of them. Touchdown Under, which you saw earlier tonight, Friday evening, with Matty Peverall and Mark Davison. I think that's it. And you can catch all those shows after the fact on any audio platform. I like iHeartRadio, but you can catch them anywhere: Spotify, Stitcher, Google, you name it. Wherever you can find audio podcasts, you can find our stuff. And believe me, you will be sorry if you do not search out Behind the Steel Curtain content, whether it's podcast form or written form. And also, I always leave this part out, all of our live podcasts that you can find on YouTube, you can also find on Facebook. So if you're watching me on Facebook right now, please be nice and let those comments be gentle and encouraging, because I need it. I'm almost 50. I need some encouragement. I'm going to be 50 in less than a week. I'm going to be 50 on the day that the Steelers release their schedule, and people aren't going to know about it. And then, of course, you have Mother's Day in there. That takes away from it. Some people are just so self-centered. Anyway, please be nice on Facebook. And also, we have a whole family of audio-only content that we bring to you each and every week. Andrew Wilbar and Jeremy Betts, they do a great job with draft coverage. I mean, they did an excellent job. I was on last week on one of the roundtables after the Steelers selected DeMarvin Leal of Texas A&M, and I mean, Jeremy Betts and Andrew Wilbar and Matty Peverall. I mean, they did an excellent job, and I was just along for the ride. Those guys really know their stuff, and you're missing out if you don't catch Andrew and Jeremy every week on the audio side. Jeffrey Benedict From the Cutting Room Floor, he breaks down things that you wouldn't expect. He really does a good job. He knows this stuff. Dave Schofield, the Stat Geek. Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, the flagship show that we have on the audio side. It's really a popular show, and his Ride or Die crew, they're very, very loyal, and you're missing out if you don't check him out. The Live Mic with Michael Beck. I always draw a blank, but we have plenty of audio-only content, so please check us out. And, of course, check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website, where we bring you news, commentary, film breakdown, anything Steelers related, we will have it for you. And if you tuned in last weekend, Thursday through Saturday, Sunday, I mean, the content was nonstop on the platform. I'm sorry, on the podcasting side and on the editorial side, the written side. It was just nonstop. And before I continue with that, I just want to see who we have in the live chat tonight on this lovely Friday night. Steeler Pittsburgh, first one in. Welcome. George Teston, who says, hey, Tony. Terry Glover, who says, good evening, Tony. Brian Brown. Just me. Wow, just me joining us tonight. Brian O'Toole, always here every Friday. I appreciate that, except for when he isn't. When I understand you have a life, I don't expect you to join in every week, but Ryan O'Toole is one of our most loyal followers, and I certainly appreciate Ryan. Let's see, Knapp 1963, Steeler Chick 46, another legend, Bridget Jones, who looks like a newcomer. So you guys are all awesome, and I am so glad that you are joining me on this Friday, this rainy Friday night. And the one thing that's not all wet, in my opinion, is the 2022 Steelers draft class. And that begins with Kenny Pickett. And when I tell you I'm still gushing, as the title suggests, over the selection of Kenny Pickett last week at pick number 20, I am not lying. I mean, I was so just in disbelief that they first of all, I was in disbelief that no other quarterback was picked before 20, because when you look at all the teams that needed quarterbacks, the Panthers, Falcons, Packers, not the Packers, the Saints, and a couple others that potentially could have needed a quarterback. For them to bypass all those quarterbacks and for Pittsburgh to have a shot at every single one at pick number 20, to me, that was amazing. And I know a lot of people look at that in a negative light because, well, if everybody passed on these quarterbacks before 20, then that must be a bad thing. But that's glass half full. Or I'm sorry, glass half empty. I tend to look on the bright side. And to me, as a Steeler fan, the way I look at it, you're the Steelers organization. You haven't needed to draft a quarterback in 18 years, since 2004. That's the last time that they needed to draft a quarterback. And even then it was up in the air because Tommy Maddox was the returning starter. I mean, he came on in 2002. He replaced Cordell Stewart, became a sensation, toast of the town, and made the playoffs, almost made it to the AFC Championship game. They fell short. Next year, it was a bad year, and Maddox had a bad year, but everybody had a bad year. But still, you thought Tommy Maddox would be the starter in 2004, and he was the starter as the season progressed. As the season opened up. But the way things unfolded in the 2004 draft, Ben Roethlisberger was available. There was talk before the draft that they would draft a quarterback, and Roethlisberger certainly was a candidate. He was linked to the team as far back as the previous fall. I remember waking up really early on a Saturday morning, and I was listening to ESPN radio, and they were talking about Roethlisberger, who was with Miami of Ohio at that time, and how he could possibly be a pick for the Steelers, who were still, at that point, they were having a bad year as far as the record, but because the AFC North was still at that time was so shaky, they still had a chance at making the playoffs, but still, Roethlisberger was linked to the Steelers. But then Phillip Rivers came along late in the draft process, or the pre-draft process. So you were wondering what they were going to do. Of course, Eli Manning was the clear-cut number one pick, and he was picked by the Chargers. He didn't want to play for the Chargers. The Giants were picking fourth. So they swapped picks. The Giants picked Phillip Rivers, fourth overall, but I guess the Chargers wanted him. So they made a trade after the draft picks. They made a trade, and that left Roethlisberger, and he fell all the way to number 11. Pittsburgh picked him, and the rest is history. So that was the last time they picked a quarterback in the first round, and that was the first time that they had done so since 1980 when they picked Mark Malone with the very last pick of the first round. Back then, there were only 28 teams, so the 28th overall pick in the 1980 NFL draft. And I was 7. I was not quite 8 yet. I was 7 at that point, and I didn't care about the draft or know about the draft. But I'm guessing, since they had just come off of 4 Super Bowls in 6 years, and since cable really didn't exist, it was around, but it wasn't really omnipresent like it is now, or like it was up until streaming came along. And because social media didn't exist, the internet didn't exist, I get a good feeling that it was pretty much an afterthought to a lot of people that they picked a quarterback. It certainly wasn't the news that it became last Thursday when the Steelers wound up with Kenny Pickett from Pitt. So back then, Mark Malone was brought in, I guess, to be the successor to Terry Bradshaw, but Terry Bradshaw wasn't even 32 years old yet. And he could have played for another 5-6 years for all anybody knew. He wound up playing another couple of years. And, of course, Mark Malone never really lived up to that first-round status. He became their starter eventually, but he never had the career that would suggest that he was a former first-round pick. But anyway, this was the first year since really 1970 when they picked Bradshaw number 1 overall. They won the coin toss with the Bears in 1970. This is the first year that they went into a draft realistically needing a quarterback. Yes, they signed Mitch Trubisky at the onset of free agency, and that was a big deal. And he's a veteran, and he's done some things in the league. He still has a lot to prove, but they had him in the fold. And, of course, they had Mason Rudolph in the fold. But there was still a huge opening for the next starting quarterback after Ben Roethlisberger retired. So you wondered what they were going to do. And they certainly did their homework in the offseason, in the pre-draft process. They went and they visited with every quarterback prospect. They went to the Senior Bowl. They went to the Combine, of course, and they visited with at their pro days. Obviously, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell. I think even Carson Strong. I mean, they went to all the prime candidates at quarterback in the pre-draft process. So they did their homework. They knew this was a big deal. If you remember back in, was it January, early February, in addition to Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert, Art II, the owner, Art Rooney II, visited the Senior Bowl. He made the trip to the Senior Bowl. So they knew it was a big deal. And I've been saying this for a couple of years. And this came to me a couple of years ago. I didn't think the Steelers were going to, I hate to say the word, I hate to use the word neglect, but it kind of was a neglect between 84 and 94, or I'm sorry, 2004, after Bradshaw retired in 84 and they drafted Ben in 2004. They didn't draft a quarterback in the first round. The highest draft pick they spent on a quarterback in that time was a second round pick on Cordell Stewart back in 1995, and he was pretty good, but he wasn't, obviously he didn't have the what am I looking for? He didn't have the skill set necessary to take them all the way, to be a franchise. I shouldn't say take them all the way, but to be a franchise quarterback. He didn't really have that in him. Of course, neither did Neil O'Donnell, who they drafted in the third round in 1990. Bubby Brister, who was, I think, a third-round pick in 86. They brought in Todd Blackledge, I think, in 88, 89. He was kind of like a backup, but he wound up starting a little bit. David Woodley, who they traded for in 1984. None of those guys really had that pedigree or that it factor to be a franchise quarterback. But, of course, Ben Roethlisberger was. But the problem was it took them 20 years to go after a potential franchise quarterback in the draft. This time, mere months after Big Ben retires, they they go for it again, and they have the entire menu of the entire pool of quarterbacks available to them. And of course, the pick was Pickett. And for a decision so huge, and for all the quarterbacks available to them, I was amazed that they made the decision so quickly. I mean, it was a few minutes before they turned the pick into Franco Harris for him to make the selection. So clearly, Kenny Pickett was the guy for them all along. Let's not kid ourselves. If there was a differing opinion or a difference of opinion within the Steelers brain trust as to who the quarterback should be, the pick should be, as far as the quarterbacks were concerned, if there was a differing of opinion, it wouldn't have taken them a few minutes to make the pick. I'm sure they would have had really intense discussions, and they would have weighed the pros and cons of each pick. They would have gotten everybody's opinion as far as, like, if you're talking about Mike Tomlin, Kevin Colbert, and Art II, maybe even Matt Canada. They would have debated this, but they didn't. They picked Pickett right away, which tells me that he was the guy for them all along. He was their pick all along, because for you to make that kind of a decision, you're going to weigh all the options. You're not going to take a few minutes. You're going to take the entire 10-minute allotted time. If, for example, say Kevin Colbert was in favor of Pickett, but Mike Tomlin really did love Malik Willis, or maybe Art II thought, hey, maybe we should go in a different direction and pick a quarterback in the future and maybe draft a different position. If there was that kind of, because Kevin Colbert's retiring, he retired after the draft. If Mike Tomlin, for example, had a huge belief in Malik Willis, well, he's the one who would have to coach him and live with him. Art II's the one who's going to have to pay him. If those guys felt strongly about a different direction, then I'm pretty sure they would have said to Kevin Colbert, look, we respect what you do. You've had a great career here, but you're on your way out. You're retiring. We have to live with this guy, whoever we pick. So we feel strongly about insert here, whether it's Malik Willis or going in another direction besides Kenny Pickett. But yet they turned the pick in really, really fast. So that tells me that, as I said earlier, they did their research. They did their homework. They visited with all these guys. They visited with other draft prospects at other positions. And they decided, with the entire quarterback field in front of them, plus other really good prospects at other positions, that Kenny Pickett was the guy. So to me, my hat's off to the Steelers for doing their homework and for being decisive about the pick when it was their time on the clock at pick number 20. So I congratulate them. I'm not saying it's going to work out, because I don't know. Nobody knows. Not to sound like a cliche, but it is a crapshoot, right? It's a crapshoot. So, but I do congratulate them for all the work they put in, because that showed me that they do realize this time around, that you're nothing without a franchise quarterback. You're nothing without a top end quarterback in the NFL. And when you have, what you got going on in the AFC North, all the, Deshaun Watson, of course, with the Browns, Lamar with the Ravens, and of course, Joe Burrow, the 2020 number 1 overall pick with the Bengals. They just went to the Super Bowl, almost won it. You know what you have going on in the AFC North, but you also, when you look at the entire AFC picture of when you're talking about the quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, Justin Herbert, who's up and coming, of course, Russell Wilson, who was just traded to the Broncos a few months ago. The Jets just drafted Zach Wilson, who was the number 2 overall pick last year. Obviously the jury's still out on him, so you don't know. The Jaguars just selected Trevor Lawrence, you have Ryan Tannehill with the Titans, who's a really good quarterback. Of course, Tua in Miami, who might make that leap someday, and they've certainly given him some weapons, namely Tyreek Hill, to hasten his progress. So there's the AFC conference, as far as quarterbacks, is going to be a handful. No matter how you look at it, no matter how many of these guys fail or succeed, it's going to be a handful. It's going to be a gauntlet over the next however many years. So you're without Ben if you're the Steelers, and you knew what you had in front of you, and you did your homework, and you had the entire field sitting there for you, the quarterback crop, and you made a decisive decision. So I congratulate them for being aggressive and recognizing the importance of this decision and making a decision, and not waiting until next year, not sitting on Mitch Trubisky, not saying, all right, we have Mason Rudolph. We had a first-round grade on him in 2018. No, they drafted a quarterback in the first round who was in the eyes of many the top quarterback in this class. So I give them a ton of credit, and we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously, it's not. There are no guarantees. He might be an absolute bust. We don't know, but I certainly applaud the Steelers for doing their homework and walking away with the best guy, as far as a lot of people were concerned, and that's all you can ask for as a fan. So that's my first topic. And as I was rambling on, I noticed somebody gave me a super chat. I think it was Ryan O'Toole, but I'm not sure exactly. I have to go and scroll back here. There it is. It's $5 from Ryan O'Toole, and I certainly appreciate that, Ryan. Thank you for the donation. You're a great fan, a great friend of the show, a great friend to me, a great friend of the entire Behind the Steel Curtain family, and I certainly thank you for the $5. And Ryan says, thanks for the kind words at the beginning. Love catching your show. Do you think they have done enough to really fix the O-line, meaning the Steelers? As you may or may not know, if you're a hardcore fan, you probably do know, Pittsburgh didn't draft an offensive lineman in the draft. And do I think that they did enough? The way the draft unfolded and what they did with Pickett, and of course Pickens and Leal and Calvin Austin the third, I like those picks. So, or at least a few of them anyway. So, do I think they did enough? Well, when you're talking about James Daniels, he was one of the top free agent linemen in the draft. They signed him pretty quick. They went out and they got Mason Cole, who is a prime candidate to be the starting center. He was a free agent. They drafted Dan Moore Jr. last year out of Texas A&M. Not many people gave him a big chance last year, but he won the job out of training camp and started the entire year at left tackle, which is arguably the most important position on the line. They have Kevin Dotson coming back as a left guard. They brought in Kendrick Green last year. They drafted him third out of Illinois in the third round. He struggled. He lost his job. Kevin Colbert said it was because of an injury, but according to the eye test, it was because of his performance, and I think it was an ankle injury. That was a convenient excuse, but at any rate, he's a high pedigreed player that they just drafted. They gave Shooks Okorafor a really decent deal to be their starting right tackle. At this point, I'm going to say yes, they did enough to address the line, because they spent a lot of draft picks on it last year. They signed a couple of high-end free agents this year. At least James Daniels is a high-end free agent, and Mason Cole is a mid-level free agent. Shukes has been a starter for them for a couple of years. He's not great, but he's not, I wouldn't say he's a liability either. Kevin Dotson, a lot of people are high on him. So I think there's the potential is there right now for them to be much better on the line. So I'm comfortable with what they did, mainly because they signed James Daniels and Mason Cole this offseason. And J.C. Hassenauer really came on strong last year. He's a developmental player that they brought in a couple of years ago. And hey, you never know. Maybe he'll be, a future starting center for them. So I think there's enough there that they can put together a good starting five, but it remains to be seen. But I think they are better off than they were last year at this time, and certainly 2 years ago. I'm sorry, not last year, but like they're better off last year after they had to kind of gut the entire line. De Castro, Villanueva, Pouncey retired. So they had a lot of work ahead of them. I think this year they're much better off on the line, and that's mainly because of James Daniels and Dan Moore going to a second year. You have Kevin Dotson, who was I think he was injured a lot last year. He'll be back. He'll be the starter at left guard. So I think you're better off overall now than you were one spring ago at this time. So I think they did enough. So we'll see what happens. But that takes me to my next topic, and that's see if I have any more super chats. Nope. All right. So my next topic is, why did they draft Kenny Pickett and not Malik Willis, not Desmond Ridder, not Sam Howell? Why did they draft Pickett at number 20? Why didn't they wait? Why didn't they grab another quarterback in the second or third round, which they obviously may have been able to do? Ridder was the next quarterback taken after Pickett. He went in the third round, and then Willis went in the third round later on. So why did they pick Pickett instead of Willis, for example? And it's a fairly simple answer. The reason why they selected Pickett is because they clearly liked him above and beyond anybody else in the draft, but specifically the quarterback class. And I realized that there were rumors out there that Pittsburgh really loved Willis, and I can see why there were rumors, because Mike Tomlin seemed to show a lot of interest in him. He had dinner with them. He met his family at the Combine or the Senior Bowl, whatever it was. The interest seemed to be high. Jerry Dulac of the Post-Gazette, a well-connected Steelers insider for many years, said as much. He was their favorite, but yet they picked Kenny Pickett. Why? Again, clearly because he was their top choice. As I said earlier in the show, if there were differing opinions about this quarterback class between Colbert, Tomlin, and Art II, maybe Matt Canada, whoever else you want to throw in there, if there was a differing opinion, I'm pretty sure it would have taken a lot longer than a few minutes to pick Kenny Pickett. So that's why Pickett was the choice, because he was their top guy. He was clearly their top guy between the quarterbacks and whoever else was available at pick number 20. That's why they picked Kenny Pickett. And, there are a lot of fans that were happy about it, but a lot still can't believe that they picked Pickett, and they don't believe in the pick. And I get it. I do. But why him and nobody else? I get why you might feel that way, because today in 2022, if you're a draft junkie, if you're somebody who thinks of yourself as being very educated and up to date and up to snuff on the draft, well, you have a reason to feel that way because there's so much information out there available to you. I said this last week. I was a super primo, big time draft junkie when I was a teenager. I was heavily into it. But that was way before the internet. That was before social media. That was before blogs and all these services that you have out there that cover the draft 24/7, 365 and give you information for free that's available to you at all times. So if you're one of those people in 2022 that's super into the draft, whether you're old like me or a teenager, well, you're going to do your homework. You're going to research these guys. You're going to do mock drafts. You're going to do everything. And you're going to come away with really strong opinions about all these players at different positions. So when you see, it's easy in that regard to fall in love with one or two specific players, right? So that happened. That's always been the case with people that are big draft fans, draft experts. But I think another side of that coin is the analytics, where you see a lot more of that now, where people think that you can you don't have to target a specific player, but you can target a specific position. Sorry, I'm rambling. And that these players are almost interchangeable. Like Willis didn't go to the third round. So a lot of people were saying, well, why did you pick Pickett in the first round when you could have you clearly could have got not Pickett. You clearly could have got Willis in the third round. He went to Tennessee in the third round. So why did you pick Pickett 20th overall when you could have got a quarterback from this class, a highly talented quarterback in this class in the third round? Why did you do that? Well, it's pretty simple why they did that, and that's because Pickett was their guy all along. He was their guy. And for as much access as we have in 2022 as outsiders, and Mel Kiper from ESPN is probably the most famous draft guru ever. I think he's a millionaire because of that. He's been doing it for 40 some years. But at the end of the day, he's still an outsider. Case in point, I think somebody said the other day he got 6 out of the 32 first-round picks right. That's how accurate he was. Here's a guy who's been doing this for, probably since he was a teenager, and he's old now, and he still only got 6 of 32 right, and he's probably the top outsider working today. He's certainly the most famous, and he probably even has some connections inside the NFL. Let's not kid ourselves. Somebody who's been around as long as he has, it's probably safe to say that he's developed some connections throughout his career. Whether it be a coach that wants to send a message or an agent or something like that, there are probably people on the inside that he is in direct contact with. And yet he still only got 6 of 32 right. So my point is, for as much access as we do have in 2022, it's still nothing compared to what the actual teams have. They meet with these guys constantly in the pre-draft process. You're talking about the Senior Bowl, the Combine, their pro days. They interview them. They get to see what they're like. In a one-on-one meeting, they talk to their college coaches, or they probably talk to their high school coaches. They talk to their ex-teammates. they probably ask him questions like, what does this player do? How do you react in this situation? You were down by 2 touchdowns in the third quarter. Did he lose focus? Did he step up? Did he show leadership skills? What did he do? So there's a human element to this that we may never understand as fans, especially if you're heavily into the analytical side of things. Like, for example, there's this growing sentiment with a lot of these positions that they're a dime a dozen, whether it's running back, receiver, whatever, But if you look at a player like Antonio Brown, and I realize he has his faults, and he has nobody else to blame but himself for the perception of him. But on the football field, he was a perfect football player. He may be the best Steeler I've ever seen. And I'm not just saying that for effect. Antonio Brown may have been the best Steeler player I have ever seen in my life. And I've been watching them since Super Bowl 14, which was in January of 1980. So that's a lot of ground that I'm covering. And Antonio Brown, from between 2013 and 2018, may have been the best Steeler player I've ever seen. He was perfect. He ran great routes. He had great hands. He was clutch. Name one time that guy did not come through for them in the clutch. He came through for them in the clutch so many times. He was maybe the most clutch Steeler player ever, whether it was a touchdown catch, a first down catch, a catch period, a sideline catch, whatever. When you needed that guy to come through, he did. And this does not have anything to do with his off the field poor character issues. Just his makeup as a football player, he was perfect. He really should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's how good he was. He had the best 6-year run for any receiver in NFL history. This guy was great. So for people to say, well, you don't pay this guy this kind of money, which a lot of people are saying this stuff now about top receivers. You don't pay him that kind of money. You don't pay him top money. You go out and draft somebody. You replace him in the draft. But, Antonio Brown's up here. And, even a really good receiver is all the way down here. So if you're the Steelers or any NFL team and you're interviewing these guys, you have personal contact with them. In-person contact. You're talking to their family and their coaches, their old coaches. That gives you a huge idea that clues you in on the kind of football players they are. So, for as much as we might look at the numbers or the analytics and say, hey, look, you could have got somebody else with the 20th pick at a different position and, Trent McDuffie, cornerback, and waited and got your quarterback in the third round. Well, basically, you're taking a human element out of sports, and clearly Antonio Brown, for as horrible as he is, oftentimes as a human being, he's basically a perfect football player. So, it's been 3 years since he left, and they're still trying to find somebody that can replace him, even 50% of what he gave them. So, and you might blame the quarterback play since 2019 as a reason why, but let's face it, a lot of the plays Antonio Brown made when he was a Steeler, a first-team All-Pro year in and year out, he would have made those plays regardless of who the quarterback was. He was a special player. So, again, why did they pick Kenny Pickett? Because they felt that he was above and beyond, head and shoulders above anybody else at the quarterback spot in the draft. And this goes back to what I said in an earlier article. If you're them and you feel strongly about a specific player, namely a quarterback, then you owe it to yourself to draft him and trust yourself to be able to develop him into the player you think he can be. So that's what they did with Kenny Pickett, and again, I applaud them. So those are my thoughts on Kenny Pickett. As far as the rest of the draft class, George Pickens, who was a second-round pick from Georgia, a ton of potential. He's got a ton of potential. His college career was hindered greatly by a torn ACL suffered last spring. And Shannon White pointed this out in the comment section of the article I published on Friday, and I'm sorry, Thursday, and I didn't really think of this. Maybe it was Wednesday, whatever day that was. Is that Pickett really didn't have great quarterback play in college, so that might have hindered his first 2 years, and his third year was kind of hindered by trying to come back from the torn ACL. But as far as his measurables and his makeup, he looks like he has the potential to be the real deal. So I'm really excited about him. DeMarvin Leal, I mean, and he maybe could have been a first-round pick, but there's a lot of uncertainty regarding his position at the NFL level because he's 283, 285, and maybe he's not fast enough to play on the end, but he's not big enough to play in the interior, so that's why he dropped. But if he's a great player, regardless of his measurables, the Steelers may have gotten a steal in the third round, so we'll see about him. Calvin Austin III from Memphis, the receiver. I really like him a lot. He's really, really small, like 5'8", 170 pounds, but he's fast. He recorded a 4.3 40-yard time at the combine, and he's being looked at as a possible unique toy in Matt Canada's offense. So I'm looking forward to watching him. To round out the draft, Connor Hayward, I should say, Cam's younger brother out of Michigan State. He looks like a jack of all trades. He could play tight end, H-back, fullback, maybe some running back, certainly special teams. They got him in the 6th round. Mark Robinson in the 7th round out of Ole Miss. He's a linebacker. He bounced around during the first 3 years of his college career. And he walked on at Ole Miss in the senior year, made the team, and was a starter. I think he had 8.5 sacks. So there might be some potential there for him to up his game. And who knows, maybe if he does, he could be a really good backup for them, maybe even more. You never know. And, of course, the quarterback out of South Dakota State, whose name escapes me. But I can kind of see the plan. The first 4 picks, you can definitely see a plan. Quarterback, receiver, D-line, to add some depth and maybe find a future starter. And, of course, you add on to the receiver room with Austin. So, and then the last 3 picks were like special teams, maybe depth. Maybe you find a gem. And, of course, the quarterback out of South Dakota State, he could possibly be a third-string quarterback down the road. You just don't know if he makes the team out of the training camp. So those are my thoughts. I was going to talk a little bit about Devin Bush, but I can save that for next week. I'll take some questions and comments to round out the show. Let's see what we have here. Mark Malone, who may or may not be the original Mark Malone, I don't know. He says, I think Pickens is going to be a force. I hope you're right. This is Ryan O'Toole, who was generous in donating $5 earlier, and he says, "I see AB as a rep concert scheduled for Pittsburgh. I didn't hear about that, but it doesn't surprise me." What else we have here? This is from Illegal Italian. Wow. I won't call the authorities. Anyway, and he says, or maybe she says, I feel like there will be documentaries one day about how incredible of a tandem Big Ben and AB were. Kind of wild to look back on it now. And that's exactly right. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, Roethlisberger made Brown a better receiver, and I'm sure that there's truth to that, but Brown made Ben a better quarterback. And certainly, I can't imagine Big Ben not feeling a great deal of comfort knowing that he had AB out there week in and week out. For as goofy as he was, and he was goofy, more goofy than we thought, as it turned out, during his career here, but you couldn't find anybody more dependable during a game. He was just clutch. And that's the fascinating thing about it is, people are always looking for high character and rightfully so. But here's an example of somebody who his character has always been questionable, and rightfully so. But there wasn't a more clutch player in the history of the team, maybe. And even Santonio Holmes, who I mean, he's really come a long way over the years, but during his time here, he had a questionable series of events. And can you name somebody more clutch than him when he was here? Sometimes that clutch gene has nothing to do with high character. It just is what it is. And that's why these teams, they interview these guys. They get a feel for them, and their access, again, for as much as we have access, it's nothing, even to this day, compared to what those teams have and the feedback they have. And what clues do they have that player A is going to be worth keeping around in 5 years, and player B, it's not just the measurables, it's the intangibles, how they answer questions, what their teammates have to say about them, what their coaches have to say about them, what their high school teachers have to say. Who knows? They're family members. I mean, they're really thorough with their research. These coaches and GMs and scouts. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just about the numbers. And Brian Brown says Tony must mean O'Dukin. I think that's how you say his name. But yes, he's an intriguing prospect. Let's face it, Mason Rudolph is he's on borrowed time right now. I feel bad for him, but when you go out and sign the top veteran quarterback, presumably in free agency, and then you go out and sign or draft the best quarterback in the draft class, that doesn't say I wouldn't be feeling very confident if I was Mason Rudolph right now. And he has a $3 million contract and none of it's guaranteed. Yikes. And then you go out and you draft somebody else in the 7th round, somebody who looks like he could be very talented. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. But if I'm Mason Rudolph, I might be asking for my release right now so I can catch on with another team and have a better shot at competing for a starting job in training camp. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll have to keep our eye on that. And this is Johnny Bravo, who says Tony loves Shrek. I don't know what that means, but I watched Shrek in the theater a few times because I have younger cousins and nieces and nephews. So I do love Shrek, so guilty as charged. And on that note, at the 50-minute mark, I think I will bid you all adieu. I thank you for joining me on this Friday night. I think it was a fun and productive show, and I hope I provided you with some great content. If not, better luck next time, right? There's always a second chance. And I will talk to you all on Monday on The Hangover with Brian and Shannon. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody, and go Steelers. And Ryan O'Toole says, Tony, you look tired. He is right. I went to a concert last night, John Mayer, and I was out till like 12:30, 1 o'clock. I worked all day. I did some yoga. I am beat. But that's no excuse. But hopefully I provided you with a great show. So you guys have a great night, and go Steelers.